You know, I'm always on the lookout for fascinating violin stories because these violins sometimes have a life of their own. And this one, the Red Diamond Stradivarius of 1732, is no exception. So 1732 means it's a late Stradivarius, about 5 years before Strad died in 1737. Stradivari died at the ripe old age of 93 and was making violins right up to the end. And towards the end, he was perhaps being assisted more by his sons Omobono and Francesco, maybe by his disciples Carlo Bergonzi, any other apprentices he may have had at the time. So it is fascinating, though. This is a very late period Strad. So how old would Stradivari have been in 1732 when he made this instrument? Perhaps about 88, thereabouts, which is a very long life for those days when people died quite young, and the fact that Cremona experienced plagues and wars, you name it. He had longevity, and no doubt the work of violin making also kept him going, because he did suffer losses. Some of his kids died, his first wife died. That's not to say that all the luthiers lived really long lives, but that, combined with Stradivari's genetic makeup, I guess, were factors in him living such a long and productive life and getting richer and richer as well. He was a good businessman, and his instruments were really sought after. So now we come on to the amazing story of this instrument. We can look at the provenance. We see that old chestnut Luigi Tarisio was involved, which invariably would mean that the violin would make its way to Paris, to Violin, and it looks like there's George Haddock in between there. I'm just going by the provenance here, according to the Tarisio website. Some names that I recognise here, like George Hart. Then it makes its way to, and violin dealers like Emil Herrmann in New York. Then it makes its way to the Museum of Fine Arts, the Evergreen House Foundation. Why the museum would give the instrument up, I don't know. Maybe they needed to raise money. Sold by Sotheby's, Hill & Sons, the now defunct, famous English violin dealers, Robin Lowe, Machold Rare Violins. The key one, though, that we want to think about, he's not here in the provenance, but he was a player, Sascha Jacobson, Jewish violinist, Jewish-American violinist. He's key in the story, so he must have been borrowing the Strad or something, or perhaps it was on loan to him, or somehow he had the privilege of playing it. And here we get some fascinating notes on Tarisio, and this is where all the stories that my teacher Rhonda Lima told me over the years, many of which are still in my memory. I wish I'd written them all down, because some of them have gone out of my head. But stories like Heifetz dropped in to see his old friend Sascha Jacobson when he was in London, things like that. I don't quite know where Ron has got these stories from old copies of the Strad. Some of them I managed to confirm easily just by doing Google searches, and some of them are more difficult to confirm. And so at times I may be taking a slight risk when I put something in a video that Ron has related to me, if I haven't been able to 100% confirm that it's an authentic story and not just perhaps an anecdote that could be, fictional or apocryphal. But I have a lot of confidence in these memories I have of conversations with Ron. When we would go for the lesson, sometimes I would want to get cracking with the lesson because I'd be tired after work. But he would just talk for about an hour before the lesson even commenced, because we'd become friends and we were both, he'd contaminated me with his fascination for the whole violin world topic. So on one occasion he told me about a violin that got washed up from the sea, and I wonder if this was the one. I sort of remembered it as Strads that survived shipwrecks, because some Strads survived wars and bombing raids and things like that. Some have probably gone down with ships and perished. But I might have remembered the details slightly wrong, but I'm sure he told me about a Strad that washed up on the beach. So here, it's documented here on the Tarisio website. So let's take a look at this. Just reading directly from it. On January the 16th, 1952, as a violent rainstorm pelted Los Angeles, Sascha Jacobson, concertmaster of the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra, was driving along the coastal highway to Pacific Palisades, the Red Diamond Strad in its case beside him. His car stalled near Santa Monica and water from an overflowing stream began to surround the vehicle and fill it up. Seeking to escape the flood, Jacobson grasped his violin case, stepped from the car into the rising waters and struggled through the torrent to higher ground. The Red Diamond was swept from his arms and out to sea. As he barely made his way to safety, he watched helpless as the violin case floated away. Imagine being caught up in that and being, from the one hand, relieved that you survived the flash flood, but on the other hand, devastated that a priceless instrument has been washed away to sea. Probably thought you'd never see it again. The next day, a prominent Los Angeles attorney, Frederick H. Sturdy, was walking along the beach of the Bel Air Country Club and spotted a violin case stuck in the sand. Inside the case he found slime, sand, water and the pieces of a violin. By amazing coincidence, Sturdy was a friend of Alfred Wallenstein, music director of the Philharmonic. When he learned the following day of Jacobson's disaster and the loss of the Red Diamond, Sturdy immediately contacted Wallenstein, identified as the lost Strad. The saltwater logged and sand-encrusted violin parts were entrusted to Hans Weishart, an outstanding luthier. What's incredible is how they can restore these damaged violins, other violins that have been smashed. They can stick them back together. It's incredible. Over the next 9 months, Weishart painstakingly restored the violin, returning it to its former glory, both in tone and appearance. Wow. Not just appearance, but tone was restored. Jacobson later wrote in appreciation, he told friends the Red Diamond sounded better than ever. Maybe the salt just added a little bit of something. In 1971, a few years after Jacobson's death, the Red Diamond was sold at auction by Sotheby's in London for $67.6 thousand, far more than it was insured for at the time of its ocean ordeal. The violin was put on the auction block by Sotheby's again in 1985. With an asking price of more than $1 million, but was not sold at that time. A few years later, an anonymous collector purchased it privately for an undisclosed sum, surely paying as much for the magic of its reincarnation as for its other exemplary attributes. And what's interesting in this case is that both Tarisio and Ingalls and Heyday, which are two of my go-to sites when I'm researching luthiers, you can see my other channel. I'll put a link to it that deals only with luthiers. And the reason I've ended up with two, it's kind of good I have, because that channel is more around violin makers and this channel is more around violinists now. I couldn't monetize the channel because too much reuse of photos and things, which is inevitable, and YouTube has quite strict rules. So then I thought I'll start another channel. So it looks like, so what was I saying? Yeah, my other channel is more about luthiers, and I'll put a short on there about this violin, and I'll put in the background, I'll put a famous violinist playing. I'll try and sample Sascha Jacobson. It's much more easier to do with a YouTube short to put music of a violinist in a 1-minute clip. YouTube allows you to do that. Occasionally, I've stopped using high-fix tracks because you then get a copyright slapped on the short, and then YouTube sometimes marks it unlisted, which is a pain because then I have to re-download it and re-upload it with different music. But as a general rule, like if I use a snippet of Perlman playing Havanese or something on the short, it's fine. But as soon as you try and pull that into a longer video, you can't get away with it. That's just the YouTube rules. And so over on the other channel is where I put all my main violin maker stuff, and I'll have a short on this violin, which you don't really need to go and watch because I've already got the photos in this video anyway, thanks to Tarisio and Ingalls and Heyday. So what a fascinating violin. I was just going to check how Sascha Jacobson came in possession when... This is where sometimes the provenance is a bit misleading, like it should say LA Philharmonic in here, but instead it just goes from 1937 right to 1971 between the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston to the Evergreen House Foundation. But it could be that there's another provenance in between, but Tarisio just haven't been able to confirm it. Although it seems pretty evident from the description of it getting washed out to sea. So what we can do as well is we can do a search on Tarisio Sascha Jacobson. You have to pay Tarisio to get access to this stuff. And then you get to two other strads that have nothing to do with this Red Diamond. So they don't always have every violin that was owned by a particular person. There may be others in the mix. But here it's very clear from the provenance that Sascha Jacobson owned it. So that's a fascinating story of the Strad, which I'm sharing with you. There's so many more, like ones that were sort of disappeared during the Holocaust and reappeared, things like that. There are some amazing stories out there. Some of the Strads, I think one was on Napoleon's ship, one of his officers had one, and all these kind of stories that really give these instruments an aura of mystique, mystery, and living evidence of history of a famous valued object being passed around, sometimes suffering tragedy, being destroyed sadly, but sometimes almost being destroyed and being resurrected, restored, just like this fine violin. And I've got to say, it looks absolutely beautiful. So there we are. This Saturday I'm heading down to London for the London Jazz Festival, and while I'm there I'm going to be checking out the blue plaques and the statue that commemorate the locations in the city where Mozart lived when he was staying there as a child for a year of his life with his father and sister, performing for the royals and so on. So watch this space, look out for that video, and ciao for now.